Good night, and welcome to Reflection Night Sessions podcast. If you're still awake at this hour, your mind is probably carrying a little more than usual. Let's sit with one thought for a while. Before we talk about fear, it's worth asking what kind of fear we usually mean. Because fear is rarely loud. It doesn't always look like panic or hesitation. Most of the time, it looks reasonable. It sounds like planning, like caution, like waiting for the right moment. We convince ourselves that we're being careful, that we're being patient, that we're just not ready yet. And maybe sometimes that's true, but sometimes underneath all of that, there's something else. Not fear of getting it wrong, but fear of what happens if we finally get it right. Because failure keeps us in motion. It keeps us oriented toward the future. Success pulls us into the present. And the present without noise can feel surprisingly exposed. We often talk about fear of failure as if it were the main thing holding people back. We say people are afraid to try, afraid to risk, afraid to lose. But if you look closely, that explanation doesn't fully hold up because many people do fail again and again, and they survive it. They complain about it, they talk about it, they even build identities around it. Failure, as painful as it is, comes with excuses, with explanations, with noise. Success, strangely, does not. Tonight, I want to explore a quieter fear, one that shows up only when the noise fades. Failure gives structure. It gives you reasons, deadlines, pressure, something to fight against. When things don't work out, right, there's always something to point at. And the timing was wrong. The system is unfair, I wasn't ready yet. It just wasn't meant to be. Failure keeps the story moving. You are still on your way, still becoming, still unfinished. And strangely, that can feel comforting. Because as long as you're failing, you don't have to fully face yourself. You're busy fixing, improving, explaining. There's no silence. Success removes noise. It removes urgency. It removes excuses. It removes the comforting story of almost. When you succeed, even in a small way, something unsettling happens. The question changes. It's no longer, can I do this? It becomes, now that I did, who am I without the struggle? Success exposes the parts of us that failure keeps hidden, the doubts that don't disappear, the emptiness that effort used to cover, the identity built around striving. And suddenly, you're left alone with yourself, not the version that's chasing something, but the version that has arrived. No one really talks about the silence after success. The moment when the goal is reached, the applause fades, and there's nothing left to push against. No enemy, no pressure, no clear next step. Just you. This is where many people feel lost, even though everything looks fine from the outside. They thought success would bring relief. Instead, it brings exposure, because now there's no struggle to hide behind. And sitting alone with yourself requires a level of honesty most people were never trained for. So what do people do? They create new goals immediately, new problems, new urgency. Not always because they want more, but because stillness feels dangerous. Stillness asks questions without speaking. Questions like, is this really what I wanted? Who am I when I'm not trying to prove something? What's left when achievement is no longer the focus? These are uncomfortable questions, not because they're dramatic, but because they're quiet. And quiet questions can't be outrun easily. This is why some people unconsciously return to failure. They sabotage momentum, delay progress, stay almost ready forever. Failure becomes familiar territory, a place where identity feels stable again. Because as long as you're failing, you're not required to fully meet yourself. You're allowed to say, someday, not yet, once I get there. Success removes someday. It brings everything into the present. At night, this fear becomes clearer. There's no audience, no performance, no comparison, just you and your thoughts. This is why nights feel heavier after periods of growth or achievement, because the mind can no longer distract itself with striving. You're left with a simple, uncomfortable truth. Progress doesn't automatically create peace. Peace requires presence, and presence means sitting with who you are without fixing, improving, or escaping. Most people are not afraid of failure. Failure hurts, but it gives direction. What people fear is the stillness that follows success. The moment when effort is no longer required and honesty becomes unavoidable. But sitting alone with yourself is not punishment. It's a skill, one that doesn't come from winning, but from staying. Staying with your thoughts, staying with your feelings, staying without immediately reaching for the next distraction. Tonight, if you feel that quiet discomfort, don't rush to fill it. Don't label it as boredom or restlessness or dissatisfaction. It might simply be you without noise for the first time in a while. And that's not something to fear, that's something to learn. And maybe that's why success feels heavier at night. During the day, we can stay distracted. We can move, talk, scroll, plan. But at night, there's nowhere to go. No future version of yourself to escape into. No unfinished goal to hide behind. Just the version of you that already exists. And that version doesn't need improvement. It needs attention. Sitting alone with yourself is not about self-analysis. It's not about fixing flaws or rewriting the past. It's about learning how to stay without turning your life into a project. Most people were never taught how to do that, so they confuse restlessness with failure and stillness with danger. But stillness isn't emptiness, it's contact. Contact with who you are when there's nothing left to prove. Tonight, if you notice that quiet resistance, that urge to move on to the next thing, pause for a moment. Not to force insight, not to reach clarity, just to sit. Because success doesn't ask you to become more. It asks you to be present with what's already here. And that may be the hardest part of all. Okay, that's all for tonight. Thank you for staying with me. This was the Reflection Night Sessions podcast. Until next time, take care. Good night.